Hola, buenos días. Pues bienvenidos al seminario del Grupo de Teoría de Juegos del Centro de Investigación Operativa. Mi nombre es Meca y en nombre del Grupo GADE, el Grupo de Teoría de Juegos de nuestro instituto, del Instituto Universitario Centro de Investigación Operativa, os doy la bienvenida a Juan Francisco Blázquiz Pulido. Juan Francisco, Juan, es un investigador joven, ¿vale? Que está pues, en la Universidad de Alicante haciendo su doctorado, también en la Escuela de Estudios Avanzados en Lucca, en Milán, y también con un postdoc, una posición postdoc en la Universidad de Milán y Lucca. Como joven investigador, pues bueno, tiene un currículum que en principio es prometedor, pero bueno, pues está como empezando y bueno, pues nosotros le auguramos que va a tener un buen futuro. Entonces, pues hoy nos va a contar un poco pues, en qué consiste su trabajo. Él tiene, bueno, va a defender su tesis en breve, por lo cual, además, según nos ha comentado, pues tiene interés en realizar una carrera académica, en España o fuera de España, y nos va a contar un poco en qué consisten los temas de su tesis. Entonces, nos va a dar dos enfoques de economía experimental y nos va a llevar pues, desde la comunicación engañosa al desarrollo de la sofisticación estratégica. Bueno, pues esto tiene la palabra.
Muchas gracias, Ana. Sí, principalmente voy a presentar lo que brevemente, digamos, resume las dos áreas en las cuales trabajo. Si no os importa, voy a presentar ambos trabajos en inglés. Las slides están en inglés y, sinceramente, para algunos términos, digámosle que no tienen una traducción clara en español, con lo cual creo que va a ser más natural si lo presento en inglés. Estos son los dos papers en los cuales voy a hablar hoy. El primero de los dos es uno de ellos que ya está, es uno de mis capítulos de tesis que afortunadamente conseguimos publicarlo el año pasado. Y trata básicamente con una metodología experimental, ver cómo la gente intenta decepcionar o engañar a otras personas mediante sus mensajes y descubrir quién intenta decepcionar de quién no. Y el segundo es un trabajo que está aún en progreso, que es lo que estoy realizando con mis compañeros en la Universidad de Milán, y está más relacionado con áreas de algunos investigadores que he visto que trabajan aquí con temas de teoría. Trata sobre el tema de Strategy Sophistication. Lo natural sería presentaros primero el de Strategy Sophistication, que es más parecido a Game Theory, y luego avanzar a algo diferente. Pero como el primero es una publicación y el otro un work in progress, si no os importa, voy a empezar presentando el que ya está publicado y luego acabaré con el work in progress. No sé cómo hacéis aquí, pero me ha contado Anabel. ¿Preguntáis durante la presentación o después? Yo no tengo ningún problema si queréis preguntarme durante la presentación. Es a lo que estoy acostumbrado. Como prefiráis.
Normalmente se hace al final, pero si alguien quiere preguntar.
Sí,
durante...
como prefiráis. De todas maneras, incluso como son dos trabajos, incluso al acabar el primero yo puedo parar y si hay alguna duda también después, que siempre suelen aparecer muchas preguntas o comentarios después, sin ningún problema, ¿vale? Okay, so now I'm going to switch to English. So let's start by talking about the first paper entitled Deceptive, Identifying Deceptive Intentions in Communication. This paper is co-authored with Prof. Polonio from currently from the University of Milan and my advisor at the IMT Lucca and Investigación. The main topic is about dishonesty, and then one could argue why dishonesty, which in some sense is related to, but it's not fully into economics, why dishonesty is important in economics. And the point is that private information plays a crucial role in many economic interactions. Here you have several examples from tax evasion, which is the most, let's say, the classical example in economics, to other cases such as financial advising, politicians, or even the currently mainstream media with the fake news. We have so many examples nowadays that show how important it is to know how people transmit information to others in many different environments, and economics is one of them. And the point is that if you go to the standard homo economicus assumption, where you think that everyone is rational and everyone expects other people to be rational, under this assumption, then everyone should lie when there is a material incentive and economic incentives to make a false statement compared to telling the truth. However, the point is, do we lie that much? I mean, if you think of the reality, Well, there is a large literature on behavior and experimental economics that showed that actually people do not like that much. It depends on many different factors. We will see some here, but we could say that it's 50-50%. It depends. It really depends on the factors. But also, if we go to the daily life, there are many cases, even economic ones, in which people truthfully make their claims, right? For example, think about reporting or making your claims to your insurance. People usually make them truthfully instead of trying to cheat to the insurance company. And also in other sense, when we go to a tax report, and now that Hacienda is coming in this month, right? People usually report to Hacienda truthfully instead of misreporting their taxes. These are the several examples in economics that show how it's important this context for economics itself, okay? And then the point is what we are going to study in this paper. In this paper, we are in the setting of a sender-receiver game. Let me explain you what this kind of games, so also called as detection games, developed by Nisi in 2005. I think the pointer, okay, now. So Nisi in 2005, he designed this simple game. This is really stylized and simple. We have two different players. One of them is called the sender, and the other is called the receiver. Okay? And there are two possible options that determine payments for both the sender and the receiver. Okay? Then the sender, as his label or role says, has to transmit information about the payments to a receiver. The sender knows everything, knows the payouts, okay, knows what allocation is assigned to each of the two players depending on what option is chosen by the receiver, and the receiver is a decision maker that is fully informed. So the receiver just knows that there are possible options, that the sender knows everything about the game, and that he or she can send one of two predefined messages. As you can observe, the first one, option A, will earn more money than option B, in this case, is true, whereas the second one is false. Okay? So if we think about how people would play this game, in the sender's role, which is the most interesting one in this case, around 50% of the people who play this role in this game actually told the truth. And this, let's say, not expected behavior by pure game theorists in the 2000 was explained by what is the so-called line aversion. So people are averse to making a lie. We dislike making a lie. For example, we have a disability when we make a false claim. And this is the reason why instead of getting the money, if we expect that the receiver is going to trust on us, we tell the truth. Okay? But in fact, I guess that if I ask you about playing this game, what would you do if you were in the role of the sender? There is another possibility. Alternatively, senders could tell the truth in order to deceive also, expecting mistrust. There are two different behaviors, and this was spotted in 2009 by Matthias Suter, using the following question. So asking basically what you expect the receiver to do with your message, either to trust or not to trust, what option do you expect the receiver to choose? There are two different behaviors that are in some sense more sophisticated. They are not plain because they are expecting mistrust that could drive in some sense behavior. In the end, you could expect that the recipient is not going to trust on the message you are sending, and therefore she will tell the truth, aiming to deceive and get the economic benefit. This is the behavior. If you are just considering whether the people tell a lie or tell the truth, is not well identified in terms of deception. So what this paper told us is that intentions matter. In the end, deception and lying in this game are not the same. Meaning deception, aiming to deceive, aiming to cheat, to get an economic benefit by, let's say, playing in some sense with the beliefs of the other person. Because in the end here, it is the receiver, the one who chooses what option is going to be implemented. Okay? Then the point is that after this discovery by Suter, the literature on dishonesty usually moved to the so-called dialogue games to avoid the statistical content. So they basically either expanded the message space, let's say, decreasing the probability of this sophisticated truth telling, or they directly quit the receiver to measure dishonesty with different type of games. But the point here of this paper is that if we go to a daily life, there are many cases where recipients do not trust on senders. In the end, from financial advising to negotiation, people do not usually trust on others, even more if we think about people that do not know each other, right? So it is important to know what's going on here. It is important to know who aims to deceive. And what we realized, what I realized, is that there is a problem with the method that Suter created. So the method of Suter was simple. This is what I told you before. First, I asked you to send one of the two possible messages, and then I asked you, what option do you expect the recipient to choose? So by combining the two, I could know if you were aiming to deceive by telling the truth or not, right? Okay, the problem is that if you are someone who aims to deceive, you also have an incentive in order to lie to the experimenter in the brief questions. Because in the end, if you, for example, have some social image concerns, reputation concerns, as we were talking before, you have several reasons why, so that not to truthfully report your intentions to the experimenter. So what we asked here is there any, let's say, refined method in order to identify who aims to deceive in these kind of sender-receiver games? And also, taking into account the relevant behaviors that were identified before, are there other relevant behaviors that are misidentified with the previous method? To do so, what we did is, so our main aim is to identify who aims to deceive in the sender-receiver game, okay? And we created a two-stage experiment. First, in the first stage, we have the classic design. So exactly we replicated the same design that was vastly used in the literature in all this year. And after that, we added a new non-static version where there is no compound driven by beliefs. And using the actions of the two games plus refining with the belief answers that were used before, we are able to identify, we designed a new method to recognize who aims to deceive in the first game, which is the troublesome one. Okay? And in order to check this new method we designed, we conducted a pre-registered online experiment using the Prolific platform with US citizens with a very large sample. Okay? This platform is well recognized in experimental economics to do online experiments and is used in several fields, either in economics or other social sciences. Let me show you the experimental design, okay? So as I said, first we have Suter's design, okay? So the strategic sender-receiver deception game, what I told you before, you have to send one of two possible messages, and the receiver chooses based on your message or even ignoring it, what option is preferred, and then we have the belief question. So whether you expect the recipient to choose or not, and an extra question, but I'm not going to talk about the extra question. Okay? And then we have our second stage, which is a non-static version of the same game. We need with this game to capture what were the intentions of senders in the first one. Okay? And the point is that in order to capture these, let's say, monetary preferences in some sense, we need to disregard possible compounds driven by strategic beliefs, misleading intentions. So to do it, the only difference that this game has compared to the previous one is that here, in the non-static version, the option suggested by the sender is the one that is going to be implemented. So now, for example, if you have that the message is this one, which is exactly the same one as in the previous game, so option A will aim you more money than option B, you are suggesting that option A is better for the recipient, so option A will be implemented. Here, what we have is that the receiver is existing, but is passive. So the recipient here gets the message, is lied or told the truth, which is important for this line aversion puzzle, but there is no static component. There is no room for misleading intentions. There is no reason to tell the truth in this game, aiming to deceive because you expect mistrust. because your suggestion is the one that is implemented. And also we have several design details to avoid possible confounds between the two games, to make the two games compatible. This game would be a kind of counterfactual disregarding strategic intentions compared to the other one. Because we are randomly choosing one game for the payments, to avoid also hedging. We have different random matches, so you are matched with a different sender to avoid also reputation problems in some regard. Also, privacy and all these details are usually preserved even in all these games, and there is no feedback over the whole experiment. And in addition, we have all the controls between samples. So we have that half of our sample are playing first the stage 1 and second the stage 2, and the other half is playing first stage 2 and second stage 1. I'm not going to present here between subject controls and checks, but basically we obtain no order effects, which is good for our design. Okay? Is there any question on the experimental design? Please? As you prefer. Como prefieras.
So each player, sender receiver, plays the game twice with the same player?
No. That's why I said here that there are different random matches.
So you randomly.
Yes, you are randomly matched, you as a sender, you are randomly matched with a recipient in each stage, in each game.
So each sender plays twice?
Yes, and each receiver is playing twice. Is playing in the first game and in the second game. But the person to whom they are played with is not the same.
And the sender knows which one of the two versions they're going to be playing?
Yeah, I mean, they don't know in advance that they are going to play a second stage. They know that there are several things to do in the experiment, as it is usual, but they are observing. I don't have here the instructions, but they are observing and reading instructions before playing the game, and they know all the details of the experiment while playing. Yeah.
What is the intuition that playing these two stages will allow you to understand the intention?
Let me explain it to you in the next slide. Okay? Is it okay?
Yeah.
It's just because it's sadly isn't necessary. Okay? To identify. So, how am I using the second stage to identify the deceptive intentions in the first one? That's the main point of the paper. Okay. Here I have the categories that are previously considered with the previous one. Okay? And here in the right, they are going to appear the behavioral tags I'm identifying with my new method. First of all, let's focus on the sophisticated truth tellers. So those people who were telling the truth, aiming to deceive, cheating in some sense the recipient, and getting an economic benefit. And this is the reason why they were telling the truth. This was the reason attributed to them. Okay? With our new method, what we say is that there are two possibilities that drive the behavior seen here, that here we are discerning. And in terms of deceptive intentions, they are different. First, the real deceivers. So those who were actually telling the truth, aiming to deceive, because they were expecting mistrust. These people, then when they are moving to the non-strategic version, they will lie because they want the benefit. And they don't have to mislead the recipient because there is no reason to get the money. Remember that only one of the two games is paid to get the benefit.
That depends on how you design the payments. Because
It's exactly the same payment in the two games.
Sorry?
The payments are not varying between the two stages. Payments are equal in the two stages.
Okay, so you give 15 and then 15.
Yes, I have several treatment effects that I'm checking because we are having different payment treatments. I'm not going to present them today because I mean it's not the main point of the paper, and we vary them and we control for them, and we see some interesting results in this regard. But between stage 1 and stage 2, for the same person within subjects in this regard, they are the same. They are preserved. Because I agree with you, and it is widely studied in this field that payments are. that payments are preserved. The only thing that is changing is what is decided in the option implemented. Either the recipient directly in the strategic version or your suggestion in the non-strategic. Okay? So we have the real sophisticated truth tellers, as I said, but there is another reason, which is what we call as pessimistic truth tellers. In the end, there could be people that do not want to lie. We cannot know due to what reasons. For example, it could be because of moral principles, like pure line aversion, as it was said before. But at the same time, they are expecting mistrust. And the fact that they are expecting mistrust doesn't guide their behaviors. In the end, they could expect that people mistrust, but they are, in some sense, truth lovers or dislike to lie. These people, if you use the previous method, you will consider them as deceivers, but they are not actually aiming to deceive by telling the truth. They just want to tell the truth because maybe, for example, telling the truth is the thing to do for them. So they shouldn't be considered as deceivers. And in fact, these are the people that with our new method, in the second stage, they tell the truth. Once they are given the chance to tell the truth again, they confirm it by telling the truth. They are telling the truth in the two games, confirming that the behavior in the first stage was not a deceptive intentional one.
What do you refer by telling the truth in the second game?
In the second game, you are sending a message that is true or false. Option A will earn you more money than option B. It's exactly the same message. The other person is not choosing, but what you are talking about, the payouts, is either a truth statement or a lie.
And in the second game, the receiver plays no role.
Plays a role, but takes no action.
My question is, if the sender is trying to optimize benefits, in the second game, regardless of what type you are, you will try to get the higher benefit. Why would you choose?
Because you are lying averse. You don't like to lie. Imagine that you are a moral Catholic. That you think that in every time you are making a lie, God is going to punish you.
In fact, I know some people that behave in that way.
And in fact, that's the main point of this literature, that show that 50% of the people told the truth. Okay? Clear enough? I agree that it's puzzling for someone who is thinking rationally, because there is actually no people, but you have to think that, and this is what experimental economics and behavior show, people are not that rational.
Well, they are rational.
They are rational. I mean, in this case,
taking into account their preferences.
Exactly. In this case, I would say that this is not rationality, but that is not homo economicus, because they are taking. You have to take into account other preferences in the decision-making process. I agree.
The next question, I missed something. Who knows that the sender is lying? The receiver knows.
The receiver has no idea.
No one.
No, this is classic in this game.
Okay.
In all these sender-receiver games, there is anonymity of the action, and no one knows what actually knows the sender, what actually is the sender. Just the experimenter. Clear enough?
No feedback after that.
No. No, I said it before, no feedback at all. This is important.
The sender knows that never.
That the recipient will never know about it.
No one is going to know that.
Yes, which is more, let's say, intuition of people being more economicus and more puzzling the fact that they are telling the truth. But they are not. Okay? Yes. And then there are two possible different behaviors. So we have that those who aim to deceive in the strategic game have incentives, what I told you before, have incentives to hide their intentions, their spiteful intentions, let's say, in the belief questionnaires. There were two behaviors in this case that were at least a bit puzzling to us. First, the so-called benevolent truth tellers, so the honest people. Okay, let's think about the sophisticated truth teller. So you are a person who told the truth deceptively. You told the truth expecting mistrust. And then I'm going to ask you, please tell me what option you expected the other person to do. The one you suggested, the other one. And I'm not paying to you, but even if paying to you, that could be the problem we spotted, which is you have no incentives to truthfully report what you expected the other person to do. You can also, in some sense, lie to experimental, right? To hide your intentions. Imagine that you have sought an image conference. You want no one to know what you did. In this case, you will not be honest, but you are a sophisticated truth teller who is also lying to experimenter. But with our design, these people, since they really want the money, they will also lie in a non-strategic game. And then we can grab all these people, discerning them from the really honest guys. Okay? And then there is another case which was more counterintuitive to me, which are the so-called benevolent liars. So benevolent liars were considered people who told a lie, and then when they are asked about what they expected, they claim that they expected the recipient not to trust them. So you cannot tell that they are aiming to deceive because they are lying, aiming to help, because in some sense they are expecting mistrust. Okay, but that's the point we stated in the paper, that actually these people, when you give them the chance to excuse the previous spiteful behavior they are conducting, they take that chance and they also lie to experimenter. And that, therefore, we can distinguish, because they will lie also in the second game, those who are actually the benevolent liars from those who we call double liars. They could be also considered as lying lovers. So those people who just gave excuses to the previous spiteful behavior. Okay? And with this discerning, we created a new categorization of the behavior you could have in the strategic game using both messages plus the strategic game belief, having 8 different behavioral types. And we redefining the concept of deceptive intentions, saying that a sender is aiming to deceive or has a deceptive intention if in any case the aim of the message is leading the recipient to a worse fate, following the GP paper definitions created by Sophistication in 2019. So let me show you the results, which are summarized in this slide, okay? Let's go first to a pessimistic. So to distinguish those who were actually sophisticated truth tellers from those who are just people that like to tell the truth, although they are expecting mistrust. We got that around 40% of them, of those who were previously considered as sophisticated tellers, are actually pessimistic people. And also, we got that around 3/4 of those with the previous method considered as benevolent liars are actually excusing the behavior and lying to experiment. Also, we got that around 1/4 of those who seem honest, because they told the truth in the strategic game and they claim they expected to be trusted, are actually at least suspicious to be sophisticated truth tellers. And finally, and this is good also in terms of our experiment, we got so few plain liars that are incongruous. We got so few incongruous behavior in this case. I'm not going to show several robustness analysis we did, but all of this is really consistent, even if we control for possible noise behavior, etc. Okay? So this is the main summary of our results. And then we can categorize, we can identify who are aiming to deceive in the strategic sender theory. So in green, you have those who were not considered deceivers with the previous method, and in redder colors, you have those who were considered. As in the past, as in the literature, we obtained around 50% of the people who aim to deceive with the previous method. Let's see what happens with our new method. This will be the discerning using our new method. And the point is that now we have to recategorize what goes in the no deceiver column and what goes in the deceiver column. So after making the shipment, we obtained that around 62.5% aiming to deceive in the strategic game, which is statistically significantly higher than using the previous method. Okay, then we have several treatment effects, but also time is scarce. Let me skip them. if you want to talk about them, I'm more than happy. Basically, we show how payments, in that sense, regarding what you said before, matter for this game. We absolutely agree. They matter, and we show that they matter. But still, even controlling by the payments, our new method always show that deception is higher than one identified with our new method. Okay? Therefore, the conclusion we could get from this paper in the end is that the relying only on belief questions is not enough to capture the deceptive intentions of the people in this kind of things. In the end, we are identifying deceptive intentions with our new method, but having 3 different new behavioral types previously not identified. Maybe they were considered, but they were not quantified. And we show that these 3 behaviors, who I have to say, they were pre-registered hypotheses. It's not that this was explorative work, but we have some pre-registration with pre-registered hypotheses claiming about these different behaviors, and we show that they are significant. We have a significant amount of people that are not aiming to deceive by telling the truth, but just pessimistic. We identified a lot of people that excuse the previous receiving message, lying to experimenter. And we also grab some truth tellers who hide their deceptive intentions. So the main takeaway of this paper is that the deception that was captured in this large literature could be even higher than what has been considered before. And these were the references I showed before. So now I'm going to move to the second paper I wanted to present today, but if there's a question.
Sure. I think it's very interesting what you presented, a very interesting way of discerning this. I like the idea. I don't do research in economics, so I don't know, but sort of taking a step from there to real life, right? Like we all do modeling, and from there to real life, there is always a step. And so, at the end, it is a game. And so, I don't know what type I am, but I don't have any regulator. I don't have a state that can punish me with penalties if I lie or not. So this is in the absence of, there's no reputation here in the end, I could choose. And so, I mean, there could be people that, you do an experiment, so I tell the truth in the first round, and I'm the benevolent, I don't remember what, the second one, the good one, I'm the good type. But then I say, you know what, you're a researcher and you've got a grant and you're either going to give me 15 euros or 5 euros. Let me get me 15 euros. I'm a benevolent, I'm a good person. I'm not a deceiver or anything, but let me get 15 euros and I'm not Catholic and all those other things but in real life, but
I have to say that you are not playing with me as a experimenter. This is also to me, important difference from these dialogue games. You are playing with another person. You are matched with another person who is actually another people like you that is, in this case, online, not coming to a lab, but if this would be a lab experiment coming to a lab, same characteristics as you, and you are playing against this person in that sense. You are not matched with no one. This is different from, for example, tax reports to achievement. That I agree, behavior could change. Now you are, and this is why I said that the second game you are lying or telling the truth to someone. Because you are matching with someone and you are telling to that person, look, this is better for you or this is better for you. And there is that person that is seeing the message and being affected. If you get 15 in the example I gave you, the person will get 5. You see my point?
Yes.
I just wanted to clarify in case this is the main content you have, that I definitely agree with you. Behavior changes with the recipient to whom you are talking about, right? I definitely agree with you. This is why I do a sender-receiver game.
Okay.
Because there is a sender and there is a receiver, and both exist, both are affected by the message. Okay, no? If you have any other questions, feel free. I'm to the hand.
Later.
Okay, so if there is no question, let's move. And now I'm moving totally the topic, okay? I'm not talking about communication, I'm not talking about how people send a message or not to another person. This paper is very different. This is work in progress. In this, I have no data at all. This is just experimental design because we are up to run the experiments really, really soon, okay? This is an experiment, everything is preliminary, even the title is preliminary. we call them up to now unlocking strategic sophistication, so how partners shape learning and transfer, okay? And this goes more into how behavioral economics contributed to game theory in some sense. I don't know how much you know about behavioral economics, but in the end, as I said at the beginning of my talk, people are not that rational. People are not homo economicus that really know what they want to know what the other people know, have common knowledge of rationality, etc. There are several studies, there are large literatures in different fields in behavioral economics that show how people are abundantly rational, all of the things. And within all these literatures, there is a term which is called strategic sophistication, which basically I summarize it as the ability of players to predict the opponent's move by analyzing the game's features, which is important. Because in the end, there are many studies that show that this ability is not only related to your individual factors, like whether you come from higher economic countries, and I don't know, your cognitive skills, psychological traits, all these things matter. But this sophistication is also affected by the type of problem you are facing and, as I will show you, how you interact with people. There is evidence that humans in the end endogenously adapt their levels, so endogenously play depending on the type of counterpart with whom they are playing with. But not only because of a matter of beliefs, but also because they adapt the, let's say, the sophistication they want to set in a average normal for game, depending on the type of counterpart they think they are playing with. There are some studies in this recent novel literature, and also they show that people learn to play more sophisticatedly, not only by adapting. It's not that, okay, now I know I'm playing with someone which is more strategic or sophisticated or more smarter. No, it's not only that I simply adapt to my counterpart, but also that I become better in some sense at thinking strategic. Here I'm talking about usual normal phone games or other kind of games in which I'm interacting with another person, for example, and we're in some sense competing because I can get a benefit depending on my action and also depending on the other's action. Okay? This is more into what is usually studied in the classic game theory. In this previous paper, published in Journal of Economic Theory in 2021, they showed that the games you are playing also matter because if they have a different complexity, they offer different learning opportunities to the people. And then the point is that there is so few evidence about what mechanisms derive through experience, so through the feedback you are getting by playing games, whether people are more or less sophisticated. Here, we are focusing on learning. That's, let's say, the main objective of study. And also, we focus about how learning in different games is transferred to a different environment. In fact, in this second point, the literature, in some sense, is quite sad because the few studies that research on this found that the depth of reasoning, so how much you reason one game, once I change you to a totally different game, differs. And this is in some sense really sad because this would mean that, for example, when you are teaching to people how to play the Nash equilibrium in your game theory class, if you change them from matrix 4 games to a different kind of game, that would mean that they are not going to accept that much level of strategic vision in some sense, right? But also, if we go to a daily life, this could be really sad if we think about it, because then this would mean that you are in some sense more deep in strategic thinking depending on the environment. Some sense makes sense, but the point is how learning is transferred from environment to environment. To that, we are conducting this study, and these are the two main research questions. So first, how your learning is influenced by your type, so how strategic or your reasoning level in some sense. But also on the level that the other person to whom you are interacting is. Okay, you are interacting with someone, and basically how this interaction that creates some learning to you through experiencing feedback affects the learning you are getting. And then we have the secondary, also important to us question, which is how the learning you acquire through learning changes when you vary to a totally different environment, which is more similar to, at least to us, what you experience in your daily life. That you are, I don't know, making decisions. Maybe here in the university, then you go to a bar and you have to make a decision of whether to, I don't know, make a report or whatever. When you change the environment, how what you learn from interacting with a person is transferred to a different environment. Okay? So let me show you the experimental design. So first of all, our main games are matrix games. Okay? Participants will play 4 classes of matrix games. And here we have what we call changing environments. So it's not that they are playing a repeated game several times, and then learning is acquired through a single game, but that we have 4 different games. First of all, we have here, you can see an example, the self-dominant. So you have a dominant strategy. You have a dominant strategy, so this game is quite simple in some sense, because you just have to do one step of reasoning to get to the solution or the mathematical. Okay? Then we have other dominants. So your counterpart, the person to whom you are playing with, is the one who has a dominant strategy. Now, to solve it, you have to do 2 steps of reasoning. Then we have self-dominated. So you have a dominated strategy. And this game is solvable in 3 steps. And you need to start from your own perspective in order to do the 3 steps of reasoning in order to get the solution of the mathematical. And finally, we have the other dominated. So your counterpart is the person who has a dominated strategy. And this is also solvable in 3 steps if you start from focusing on the counterpart's view. Is it clear? And then we will have that in these 4 different classes of games, people are playing the 4 of them. Okay? And the point is that we listen the sophisticated types. There are some recent papers that show how using clustering analysis, so it's not that I'm defining a type and I'm saying, okay, how many people play in this way or in this other. But that doing a clustering analysis, that in the end is a statistical method that is in some sense stylized, so it's not that is defined by what I want to get, but it's something external. These studies show that there are 3 main kinds or clusters of people. First, we have the native or unsophisticated. So those people who just, when they are facing these matrix games, they just consider their own incentives. They are only considering their own incentives regarding the game structure, and they are not taking into account they're playing with someone whose action is going to matter in order to the final payments of both players. It's not that they're playing alone. Okay? In the end, these people usually make only one step of reasoning. They ignore that the other person matters for also their action. Then we have the strategic people. So those people who consider the other player's incentives in the game in order to better respond to them. These people, they make 2 or more steps of reasoning, and they are considering the other's rationality and their own rationality in order to play and choose an action in the game. And finally, we have people who are driven by other value preferences. So those who, let's say, the way in which they decide the action varies from the classical economic assumption or the levels of reasoning models. Because in the end, they are considering players' incentives generally, either by maximizing efficiency or minimizing inequality, for example. Okay? So we have 3 types. So in the end, 3 factorial, 6, we will have 6 different matching pairs. These are the 6 matching pairs we expect to have in our experiment. In order to get the sophistication type assigned to you before you come, because I have to, okay, let me get the spoiler. This is an experiment that is conducted using eye tracking data. So we have 2 different people in 2 different eye tracking labs. So we are observing with the eye trackers what they are observing, how they analyze the game. I will tell you in a while how this works, okay? So we really need to know more or less how They are in terms of sophistication in order to do the matchings, because we need a minimum amount of people for each type of combination. So what we are going to do, is a pre-experimental session. So we will conduct a lab experiment before the midnight tracking experiment. And the main goal of this is just to get the sophistication level in advance. So once they are coming to the eye tracking labs, we more or less know, we will recheck, we more or less know what type of matchings we are conducting at each time to have the proper types of our pre-registered experiment. Okay? This session will be only with participants without any feedback, because we don't want to know how they are learning. In this case, we will study in the main experiment. This is only in order to know what is the experiment. Okay? And apart from this, we also, in this experimental questionnaire, in this experimental session, we will have a post-experimental questionnaire asking about their intelligence using the writing test. This is a test so much used in social sciences, not only in economics, well validated. And this is also to conduct a robust analysis instead of by differing by the sophistication type, by differing by intelligence with this measure. We will also check for the risk preferences to control for risk aversion that could influence in the games. I will talk about it later. And then reflectivity, meaning reflectivity in some sense how much deliberation or intuition matters for your decisions. There are some studies, some tests that have been developed, in particular we use the one in Son and Oppenheimer, that minimizes the intelligence compound, so it's less related to numeracy. I guess you have seen somewhere this kind of test, like there is a ball and a bat that costs €1. The ball costs 5 cents. How much costs the bat? I know that the question seems dumb, but this in some sense measures not only numeracy, but also how fast people try to answer the answer. Because in the end, depending on whether you deliberate or not, there is an intuitive answer that is a wrong answer. And this is what this type of CRT, the so-called CRT test, measure. Okay? So let's go to the main experiment. So remember that we are going to have that participants interact always with the same person. Okay? They are matched, example. They come to a tracking lab and they play in different games. The two of them are separated in 2 different eye tracking labs. So there is full anonymity. In the regard, they will never know who's the other person. All these concerns that are usually well preserved in this field of experimental economics are preserved. Okay? And we have these 2 series. So we have that first, they are playing the assessment phase. First, they are playing the matrix games, I showed you before. 12 trials, so 4 of each type. And this is just to check if there is any change from day 1 to day 2 of the sophistication types. Okay? And then we have the transfer of learning task. Right after, they play a different type of game, totally different, I will show you in a while, that requires also study sophistication. Okay? Then they go to the phase 2, learning phase with feedback. So here, the matrix games are of the same type, but there are perturbations. Perturbations meaning that there are little differences in terms of adding constant payoff or changing the rows and columns. So the game type is exactly the same, but this is different to the usual people's view. Okay? And this is done with 2 different treatments. So this is as usual in economics. We have a treatment and a placebo control. The treatment, here in the learning phase, you are getting feedback. After each game, you are getting feedback about what the other person did, and also, of course, you know what you did. And what's the final cell of the matrix that is selected in that game. Okay? And then we have the reassessment phase without feedback, which basically is the same kind of phase as the first one, and then we will do the differences, comparing the results here with the results here, and the results here with the results here. So checking whether the sophistication type has increased or has changed from the assessment to the reassessment phase. Is it clear? Okay, so let me tell you about the feedback first. So this is kind of the feedback. This is a screenshot of the interface we are using. I know the small numbers for this slide, I'm sorry. It's just how it appears here. Everything is clear in the iPhone lab, okay? So during the learning phase, those who are in the feedback treatment, right after playing, they are not only seeing what action they chose. Okay, they are playing as their role player in general. Okay, but they also see what action the counterpart chooses. They have free time to observe choices in the game, and then they press the spacebar in order to continue to the next game. And this is done for the 12 different trials.
That's good, but I think this, you can stay here, but just to understand a bit more, you mentioned this before, but I probably didn't understand it fully. So I understand the one-step reasoning versus the two or more. So the one-step reasoning is, if I'm the blue player, I will just choose...
You mean the games?
During the game.
Okay,
so I will just choose...
Let's move to the games. It's going to be clear when you say the games. Okay? You mean the self-dominant. Okay, here, in the one-step of reasoning, you have a dominant action. So there is one of your three actions that is a best response for you,
yes,
because it dominates the other two.
Yes.
So you just have one step of reasoning in order to get a clear.
Yes.
In fact, you don't have to even take into account the other person.
Yeah.
This is different from the rest of the games.
Okay.
For example, in the other dominant, you have to take into account that the other person has a dominant action that is going to choose if it's rational enough, and so on. And then in the other two, you have a dominated action. So it's not that now you have an action that is better, that pays better than the rest. It's that you have an action that pays worse. So in principle, if you are rational enough, you shouldn't consider this action at all. Once you discard this action, you should go, in this case, for example, is the highest one. Here, you have that 83 is greater than 39, 65 is greater than 57, and 50 is greater than 36. So, when you analyze the game, you should consider that this action is never going to be played. And if you are fully rational, you assume common knowledge or rationality, for example, you should take into account that the other person will consider this. If the other person considers this, then you keep this part and you are playing just this game. And if you play just this game and you consider the other actions, look, you have that 79 is greater than 60, 61 is greater than 43. And the same with the first one. So the other person, if he is considering this, you are thinking now 2 steps of reasoning will stitch to this action. And then you choose the third one.
So when you are in that is the 3 steps, you are, because you could be paired with somebody that is naive, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And if you're paired with somebody that is naive, you're overthinking it, because the other person will not do everything that you just said.
Mm-hmm.
Correct? Okay.
And that's the point, like how the different type of your counterpart matters for your learning. Because in the end, you are getting feedback in the learning phase.
Right. So if I'm, let's say, I come to be a sophisticated or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and I would do all the 3 steps of reasoning that you do, should I mean, do you expect me to know that my counterpart could be naive or could be sophisticated?
Yes, you could adapt
Yeah.
to your counterpart. Indeed, this would be the, in some sense, most rational thing, because your beliefs will be right.
Would my decision be different if my optimal decision would be different if
Depending
my
on the game.
counterpart is naive or sophisticated?
Yes,
in that.
you adapt to the counterpart you are facing too. Yes, I mean, the games differ, okay? We are changing the payoffs so that some features of the payoffs, such as focal points, saliency, or whatever, matter, okay? And they make these differences. But yes, depending on the type of counterpart you are facing, your best response changes. Absolutely.
Okay. So what you're saying is that at some point you get to learn the type of the other one.
This is the main interest of the study.
Okay.
So to know how you learn in the games differs depending on the type of person you are facing to. Because in the end, when you are in this phase,
Mm-hmm.
you have no way in order to know it. You are not getting feedback, you don't know what the other person is doing.
Right.
But here you are getting feedback, you are seeing what the other person is doing. You are seeing what is getting implemented.
Okay.
So then here, when you don't know what the other person is doing, the point is, okay, you're learning here, change it. how you analyze the game and how you play the game.
The payoff in the first step is independent of the game.
Sorry?
The payoff for the player.
What do you mean
The
by
real payoff in the experiment, you pay the people,
Yeah, yes,
the
yes.
task, is independent of the game,
what do you mean by independent of the game?
of the result.
The payoffs of the game
If
are
I don't know,
the payoffs in the matrices. So we choose one of these games, one of these games, one of these games, one of these, and one of these, and you are paid by each.
If I play one,
If you are playing one, for example, and you choose here, you get 42 points, and then it is 42 times, I think it's 5 times.
but the question is, if I obtain 42, I know what the other player will be.
In the learning case, yes. But the point is that you don't know until the end of the experiment what game is selected for payment.
But you don't pay for that,
We pay for
by
that.
the fixed amount.
No, okay, so we choose one trial of each type for payments. One of each, but we don't tell you what one. So you are playing the 12 trials here, and you don't know what game is going to be the one that determines your payment until the very end of the experiment.
Okay, in the first step, you don't know how much.
How much you gain? No, you don't know it. And in the first and in the third, you are neither knowing.
You know for sure, but you know if you choose this game, you know what you're going to do.
Yes.
Be-
Yes, but you will have to remember at the end of the experimental session what game, I mean, if you want to guess what one was the payment obtained by the other person, you should have to remember all the trials you did. You know what I mean?
And you say the trial, but it is not a repeat game, and it change.
Exactly. Like also you have to consider that it's not that you have one game that you are playing several times, but
It changes.
there are changing environments. Okay? Is it clear? Okay, so this is the feedback I told you, and then there is the transfer of learning. So we have the 12 trials of this type, the 12 trials in phase 2 of this type with the feedback right after the game, and then these trials also in phase 3. And then the point is, okay, how the learning you are acquiring is transferred to a different game. So we have in phase 1, right after the games of matrix form, a different type of game that measures your strategic sophistication. And in the phase 3, also to check the differences between the two after the learning with matrices. Okay? And the game is the following one. It's the so-called 1120 game. It's a cyclical version developed by Agawa and Penta in 2016. I don't know, I guess you don't know this game, okay? In fact, this is another game. This is not of the game, okay? The game is super simple. I can explain it in one single paragraph. Imagine that you are matched with another person of this room, okay? And both of you have to choose a number between 11 and 12. In this cyclical version, how the payment works is the following. You get the payment of the number you are choosing. And there are two types of bonuses. One bonus of, depending on the treatment, but of, let's say, 80 points, if you choose one number below the number that your counterpart chose. And another bonus of 10 points if you choose exactly the same number of your counterpart. And the numbers you can choose are from 11 to 20. You understand again? What's the number you think you will choose?
So if you choose a smaller one than the other one, you get 80 points.
One, only one. Less than the other one.
Only one.
Only one.
So if you choose, for example, 20, and your counterpart choose 19, you get 20, and your counterpart gets 19 plus 8. And these points are transferred to man.
And you choose the same.
You get the number plus 10 points. So for example, if both of you choose 11, you both get 21.
If the other one chooses also 11.
Yeah, that's why I said if you both choose 11. Okay? This game, the 1120 game, the classic version is not a cyclical. The bonus for pairing, for matching the same choice, is not in the classic version. This was a version, the cyclical version, that breaks the cycles, because in the end, was the way of playing this game of thinking. Oh, the highest money, right, is 20. So I would choose 20s to get 20 points. But if I choose one less than 20, that is what the highest money is that the other person is going to choose, I get the bonus. And you continue. In the classic version, without the bonus for the same choice, there is a cycle because you go until 11 and then you move up to 20. Here, with the bonus for the same choice, we still have one single pure static equilibrium, which is playing that. But the reasoning of the levels of rationality, this is why this game is so used, is that to make these levels steps of reasoning. Okay?
In a beauty contest.
Kind of similar to a beauty contest. Okay? And then what we designed, because remember we are using eye tracking data here also, is that we designed an eye tracking version of this game. So participants will observe this interface. So these are the possible choices that they can choose. Okay? And then we will analyze the steps of reasoning using the transitions of the eyes in the decision-making process here. Okay? And we have two different variations. This is based on the payment variations used in Allegro and Penta, which vary basically on the high bonus paid. So the bonus for being one below the other person. Being either 80 or 20, and fixing the low bonus to 20. This is shown that matters for the strategic sophistication level that people set in the game. This is why we reset it. Okay? And how the game will work is that first you are observing this page, this screen, and once you have your decision, you press the spacebar, and you see this screen with no number. You move the mouse, you click, for example, here the 18, and you know it's in Italian because we are conducting it in Milan. You know what is your choice, and you move to the next area. Okay? So the point is how the learning acquired from Matrix games transferred to this game. In the sense of whether the learning you are acquiring in phase 2 is shown in phase 3 compared to your behavior in these games in phase 1. Is it clear? And this is shown not only by choices, but also, and this is also an extra novelty of this game, by showing how people reason. Because what we could expect in some sense is that since this is the first screen in which they are seeing the numbers they could choose, they could make actually the steps of reasoning behavior.
So to be clear, the learning that you refer to here is learning about the opponent.
Learning in general. It could be about the opponent in the sense of knowing what type of opponent you are doing, but also it could be learning of increasing your sophistication level.
Okay.
Because imagine, for example, that you are an 8th person at the beginning, that you never saw the Matrix games in your life. So when you analyze the games at the beginning, you are just focusing about your payments, you choose, and you are not considering that there is another person that is, has a lot of power in order to decide what's your payment, right? Then when you are in the feedback phase, you start realizing that, oh, the cell I wanted to choose is not the one chosen, because the other person chose a different option. And then you start focusing also on the other people. This is what we can see with our eye tracking data. In fact, let me go to the part, which is the following. How to compute the sophistication times using eye tracking data. This is based on the work of one of my co-authors, Lucca Bologna, which using cluster analysis, using the average proportion of relevant transitions, we can get the 3 types I told you before. First, we have the naive people. So they just analyze the game using own transitions. So these are your players. If you are the no player, these are the core players. So you are either using these transitions or these ones. Okay? Maybe in this case, you should use these ones, but also you could also compare these ones if you are fixing what the other is going to do. Okay? Then we have the strategic people. who are people that distribute their attention on their own pages, but also they consider what the other person is going to do. So they could, let's say, first consider how the other person could behave using order within and between transitions, and then they will move and they will use the transitions once they know if so what they're going to do. And finally, we have the other regarding preferences. Other regarding preferences would be mainly determined having a higher fraction of what is called the inter-thread transitions, where they are comparing the payoffs given the two actions of the two players. This could be driven by maximizing efficiency or minimizing inequality. Okay? And by using the proportion of transitions that we are collecting with our eye trackers, let me say that these machines are really, really accurate on getting all of this. I mean, if you go to an eye tracking lab, you realize why they are, because people are sitting in a chair. In fact, the eye tracker we have is the one in which you are putting your chin, so it's really accurate, okay, in that count. It's not, of course, perfect, but defining the matrices with detail, you can really see what area of interest, because in the end here you can divide by 9 areas of interest, and then the point is not where people look at, but how people move to one location to another one. This is the main key difference of this kind of analysis, which in the end has been developed by my co-author, compared to usual eye tracking studies in other fields. Here is not that we are focusing on how much time they are looking to this number, but about whether they are moving in this way, or in this way, or in this way, and so on. Okay? Okay, so then regarding the statistical analysis, our main thing is a post minus pre differences. No? And we have a control group and a treatment group, phase 1, phase 3, and we want to get whether there are the learning differences between subjects. And we have two different measures. The behavioral data, so fraction of equilibrium choices, and the proportion of the gate transitions I told you in the other slide. And then, in order to analyze this, I will have also the analysis aggregating over the 12 trials. And we control by the type of thing. And then about the statistical analysis, we are thinking to use a two-way mix ANOVA. So we have the within factor, so every player is playing the two phases, and the between one, which is the task of being in the feedback treatment or in the control condition, in order to check whether learning exists, and also to check whether this, adding also another variables, depends on the type you're on and your control. And this is also for eye-tracking-based measures. Testing differences, instead of with proportion of equilibrium numbers, proportion of transitions of each of the types. So this is what I showed you before, and then our hypothesis. And this is related to one of the points I said before, which is, first, we expect that participants choose more actions in the phase 3 consistent with equilibrium. So there is actual learning. This is also based on previous studies. No? With feedback, there is learning. This is already shown. But the point is that we expect that the learning acquired is going to be based both on your type and on your counterpart's type. So, in fact, we are expecting that the higher increase is in those who are considered native. Because in the end, those native people are those who have more room for learning. It's easier in some sense to learn for them because they can increase their level more than the static people. Then we have a hypothesis regarding the static participants, which is that it's not that it's impossible to learn, but a significant fraction of the static people will also learn. And regarding how the counterpart matters for your type, the point is that we expect that the native people basically learn when they are matched with the static participants, because if they are matched with other people, they are learning less. In the end, they have less reasons through the feedback to move and focus on what the other person is doing. And also we expect that the strategic participants are only learning when they are facing another strategic participant, which is the one that allows them to make higher steps of research. And then there is something different from learning sophistication, which is other kind of people, which to us is very interesting. So how, when you are facing someone, who is other regarding, or you are another regarding person, and face someone that is not other regarding, matters, right? Because imagine that you are a person that likes to cooperate, likes to increase efficiency and decrease equality, and you realize that the other people in the world are not like you, and you are getting worse off because you are cooperating with people that do not cooperate with you, for example. What happened with them is all the feedback that you are getting, changing your type, and it's not that you are not sophisticated, but that you move to a different type of decision-making process because you realize that this is worse off for you, and your beliefs change about what other people are going to do. So we study on the regarding also in this part. We hypothesize that a significant fraction will choose equilibrium more when they are matching with a different opponent.
Can I ask you? Sure. Before you show the results. So
no, I don't have the results.
I don't have the results.
I don't have the data. I thought I said it at the beginning.
When I read what I don't understand too much of the number 6. Okay, but 1 through 5 to me look like I would expect them to be true. I mean, I don't know if I need this whole experiment to confirm this. Is there any one of them? You haven't run the experiment, so you don't know what you will learn. Is there any one to 5? I don't know about 6. That you believe that may not be true?
I mean, of course.
Because they seem all very straightforward, right?
They seem all straightforward, but you have to consider that very difficult also learning in some sense. Okay, it's true that you are playing with someone and you are getting the feedback, but people are not that smart to analyze and to understand what's going on and getting all the possible features, right? Again, for example, think about when you are a naive person. People also have noise behavior, or there are mistakes, right? And a mistake could change what you think that other people believe. So it's not straightforward what's going to happen. I know that these are the more straightforward hypotheses we could have. I definitely agree with that. But also, the ones that are concerning not only your type, but also the counterpart's type, which is the main contribution of this project, are the hardest one, because they depend on what your counterpart, but also on how you interact with the other person, right? Because you could start like a level 2, being strategic, but facing another level 2, but imagine that none of you is increasing, then you don't have this room for increasing higher and higher and higher. But not only that, imagine that you are facing a naive counterpart. And the naive counterpart, no matter what you are doing, although you are strategic, is not following you. Is not learning at all. Or another regarding participant. And you don't know what is other regarding. You have never worked on all these types, right? Of things. You don't know what's going on. These kind of things of the interaction matter in the end. So I know they could seem straightforward in some sense, but
in other words, I would be surprised if you show us that one of these
isn't true. No, I mean, I would also be surprised, but you would be surprised about how many experiments do not have aligned results.
What do you choose the decision maker?
We have, I mean, they are usually. No, I mean, this is conducted in a laboratory experiment. This is a laboratory experiment. This is conducted in the laboratory in Milan. So, I mean, the sample provenience is usually students, either undergraduate or master's students, usually. Mainly from social sciences, in the end, mainly from economics, from, I would be most psychology or other social sciences.
And the number of trials?
The number of trials, I mean.
Well, because it's a small number.
Well, it's tricky because you have to consider two things. There is a trade-off because in the end, we have to consider that we have a small number of trials, but you cannot have too many trials because don't want to do too long experiment, right? Because in the end, this is a repeating interaction, so exactly. Also, there could be a decay in terms of attention, in terms of the response time, so how much time they are taking to play. This matters. So we have this trade-off. In fact, at the beginning, we were thinking to have more trials in the learning phase, but at the end, we wanted to stick into 1 hour experiment, also for organizational purposes. This number of trials is like the maximum one we can have, so that everything is well connected. So, well, I mean, regarding the transfer of learning, the same. So we expect transfer of learning in some sense, so lower numbers in the phase 3 compared to phase 1. And regarding the interaction between the two things, this is curious because, I mean, the 11-20 game is not that new, but the cyclical version is not that old. I mean, the first study that published something about this, it was around 2016. So there are not that many, there are studies, and this is a well-recognized game, but I'm really curious about the behavior in this game. In fact, that's why also we have these post-experimental questions about the role of risk aversion, for example. We're expecting that other negative participants are more likely to choose the highest number, in fact, than others, because, and this is something that I think is interesting for the eye tracking, because we could see whether after learning and knowing that the person is going to cooperate or not, maybe they are going directly to 20 instead of making the behavioral reasoning that we could expect. So it's some said it's also interesting to us. So let me give some takeaways so that I have as a last slide. I guess that I'm almost over time, right? So just some takeaways about today, about what we saw. So understanding people's reasoning, and also what motivates people to make the decisions matters and is crucial in economics. And here what I presented is 2 different experimental studies that show in very different areas, right? How strategic interactions are different depending on the reasoning process. The first one that I presented, where we created a new method to extend the deceptive intentions, so we showed that the belief questions are something really used in economics, and they are really important, and I agree they are fine. But depending on the setting, you can rely more or less on them. And also we examine how the mechanisms through which learning in different experience opportunities with feedback shape the strategic sophistication of the people. So these are 2 examples of how in experimental economics, behavioral complexities and trade-off, showing how the simple assumptions, so this straightforward behavior we could expect sometimes may not hold in the reality. There are many examples in this field that show how we are sometimes not that rational or not that selfish as a pure theorist could expect. And this is all. So thank you very much.
Okay. Any other questions?
One question.
We have the debate.
Okay, no, just one for now. No, just something that in my mind about the first project. I believe it's covered already, but maybe I missed it. But is it possible that there is a behavior of just fairness? So suppose I don't lie or I don't tell the truth, but I just say, I see the numbers, right? Let's say with the ones you said, you show me 5 and 15. All right, I'll let you win 5, and because somebody's paying us, you know, and I'll get 15. And in the next round, not because I want to lie or anything, but I think it's fair that now I make 15 and you make 5, and so I'm good. And so each of us make 20. But it's not a matter of lying or not lying, but in the end, a search for fairness.
I definitely agree.
We're both happy, and
your behavior is not driven by line preferences, but by, for example, other line preferences. Fairness is one of them, right? You have to consider that you are not matched with the same person in the two. This is one of the reasons. So I have different matching. So to avoid that, you have also these concerns regarding, okay, now I changed my strategy because I already did a spiteful behavior, and I want to change it to compensate. This is one of the reasons why we have this different random matching between the 2 trials.
So you can tell that there will not be fairness.
There could be. I cannot say that they are not, but fairness preferences should be constant between the two games, because in the end you are playing with a person first time. Yes. The point of I definitely agree with you that there are preferences that are not driven by line aversion in some sense that could differ, that could matter in the two games. But our purpose with the second game is to have everything the same, but the strategic component. So that is what is called a counterfactual. So that you are preserving everything, but the strategic, and then you have, like in some sense, also the difference between the two. I agree with that indeed. I didn't present it today, but I have a job market paper, which is what I'm mostly currently working. We talked about that, about how in this line aversion literature, the behavior of the people is driven by line aversion itself or by consequential preferences. So whether you want to avoid inequalities, whether you want to increase efficiency, or you just don't care about all of this, or you only care about the line thing. This is a different ballgame. I will remind you sort of.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Juan, and
Thank you.
it was nice to
No, thanks to you for inviting me.
A nice talk because you answer all the questions, you defend with passion what you are doing.
No.
Enthusiastic.
Puedo ahora hablar en español. Es que lo que se me hace muy raro a veces es decir algunos términos como deception. Deception en sí no existe en español. Decepcionar como tal, creo que la verdad no lo he tenido. No, muchísimas gracias por la invitación y encantado. Espero que se haya podido entender porque al fin y al cabo entiendo que estos temas de experimental a veces como que suenan muy diferentes a lo que es pure game theory, ¿no? A lo que es teoría de juegos clásica. Pero bueno, la verdad es que escogí estos dos principalmente por eso, por intentar hacer la charla, la presentación lo más, ya no solo amena, sino interesante posible para el público de hoy, que era un poco diferente. Y muchísimas gracias por la presentación, gracias por los comentarios, o sea, también muy útil.
Y para nosotros también un placer porque no conocemos tanto experimentación aquí. Creo, bueno, Joaquín ha hecho algo, pero un poquito, y José Manuel también, bueno, es una charla enriquecedora.
Sí.
Nosotros conocer un poco,
Pequeña
entrar así por primera vez, bueno, y ver
Sí, o sea, yo
lo que se hace como
Era muy
interesante.
Era admitir que me sorprendió, porque yo hablé con Ana de qué presenta, porque yo al final todo mi background, yo hice el grado en matemáticas en la Universidad de Lucca. Entonces, no es que yo sea una persona que ha empezado a experimentar para nada. Yo he dado muchas vueltas y me ha acabado encantando experimentar y trabajo mucho en experimental, pero no soy el clásico experimentalista porque me gusta la teoría. Es más, otro trabajo que tengo es en teoría de juegos evolutiva, que no tiene absolutamente nada que ver con ni behavior ni experimental economics. ¿Por qué decidí presentar estos dos? Es básicamente porque Ana me dijo que era como a lo mejor lo más diferente e interesante para ver. Estaría también encantado de hablar de ese otro trabajo o de otros. Generalmente a mí me gusta, por ejemplo, hacer un trabajo experimental basado en un modelo teórico y luego querer testear las hipótesis que da un modelo teórico. Todo depende del paper en sí. Por ejemplo, el segundo que os he presentado, varias de las cosas, aunque no las he dicho porque al fin y al cabo la presentación está muy en ciernes, no tenemos nada, están basadas en los modelos de cognitive en cuanto a los niveles de racionalidad, todo eso está basado en una teoría pura. No es que sean hipótesis sacadas al azar, en ese sentido.
Muy bien, pues nada, muchas gracias y otro día, otra vez, pues nos cuentas otra cosa de colectiva en otro momento.